Well, hello folks, it's John with Ozarks Backroads with you today. We're in the garage. The mighty Versys here is due for some service. Thought I'd make a quick video, kind of run through. We got to change the spark plugs, air filter, probably do a throttle body, check the throttle body sync while we got the tank up and we're in there on top of the motor, and an oil change. So it's kind of its first major service. It's got, I think, around 8,000 miles on it, or 8,500, something like that. Invite you to all stick around. We'll tear into this thing, see what's involved in doing a little service work on the 2016 Versys 1000. Well, the first thing we need to do is get this gas tank up in the air so we can get in under it. And in order to do that, we got to pull these side panels, these upper side panels off. There's one screw right here on each one, and then they just snap in grommets. You just pull them off to the side. So we'll take these two screws, one out of each one, and pull them off. And then we've got a couple of bolts here on top of in front of the tank that we take out, and that will allow us to lift the tank straight up in the front, and it will hinge right back here on this hinge. And then we'll prop something under it there to hold it up. So we'll get that done and get back with you here. We've got our tank up in the air here. Went ahead and got a stick and propped that up. There is a vent hose right here that needs to be taken off the tank. There's a nipple on the tank right here that goes on. Need to pull that vent hose off before the tank will raise up. But we got that off, and we got the tank up in the air now. So kind of expose the air box right here. We're going to go ahead and take it off, and it's pretty simple. It's got screws all the way around the perimeter of it, and then it's got one down in this hole right in the center is a deep screw. They're all Allen or Phillips head. And then it looks like we got this one bracket right here with the screw with the bolt in it. We'll take that out, and that'll get our air box top of our lid of our air box off, expose our air filter. Then we'll go ahead and remove the lower portion of the air box, which will give us access to the spark plugs and the throttle bodies. Well, we got our lid off the air box there. There is a bracket back here, I forgot to mention, that clips through these two slots in the top of the air box, the lid. So you have to pop that up, just leave it back here. It has some connectors on it. So pull that out before you take the lid off. It has to come off. And then we've got access to our filter here. So it just kind of lives right there. And this filter is pretty dirty. It's got a lot of bugs in it. Probably can't see them, but it's got a lot of dirt and bugs in it. So it's probably a good time to change it. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that. The next thing we've got to do to get this lower box off is we're going to have to pull this side panel right here. This panel here has to come off because there's an access to unscrew the clamps right here that hold these inlets over the throttle bodies. There's a bolt we have to unscrew, and it'll release all the clamps and let that off. So to get this side panel off, we just have a couple of screws here. We got one up here, needs to come out, and back here at the back there's another one right here, needs to come off. And I believe after those two screws are out, it'll unplug. It just snaps into grommets. So let's get that off, and then we'll see about loosening up the clamps up here on these air inlets off these throttle bodies. There is a hose that has to be removed also back here on the back. You can see it right here. Just pinch the clamp together, pull it off the hose, and then pull the hose off the nipple. All right, I wanted to show you guys the screw. We're over here on the left side. I got that panel off, which gives me access to get these other two screws to get the bottom part of the breather off. There is an extra bolt up in the front. Where's it at? Up in the front corner up here that has to come off with that panel. It's bolted in right up here, so you can be aware of that. And then underneath here, if we look under the side, this is the screw that releases the air horns off of the throttle bodies. And there's one on each side. Each screw does 2 throttle bodies. So this bolt here, right there in the center of the frame, is the one. It releases the clamps on the 2 air horns on the left side, and then on the other side there's another one just like it, same spot, that releases the clamps on the air horns on the 2 right cylinders. So I've got both panels off, and I've loosened these bolts on both sides, and we're ready to lift the air box off of the bike now. We're ready to lift this air box off. There is one connector over here on the far end, on the right side on the back. You can see it down here, that needs to be unplugged. You just push down on the tab and pull it out of the, it goes right in the back of the air box back there, and you'll see it when you look. All right, and then we have unhooked the hose off the back here. You see it's off the nipple. So with the clamps loosened underneath, we should be able to just give that a little tug, and it'll come right off the air horns, and we can finagle this thing out of here. Looks like I got some little something going on up front here. There it comes. Oh, we got one more. Now that I've got that up, we've got one more vent hose right here. It needs to come off, and then we'll be good to go. So let's get this out of the way and we'll move on. We're going to take a look here at this air box. I flipped it over here, and you can see the two bolts and how they work, the clamps that are around those air horns. So one bolt does 2 on that side, and the other bolt does 2 over here. So that's kind of how that works. This up, you can see the clamps here, how those work. So that's the deal with them. You unscrew both of those, both sides, and then all 4 of the inlets will unclamp, and that air box will come off the horns. It's time to get the spark plug boot, the coil boots off of the plugs here. We got our 4 plugs running across here, and these are the coils with the little connectors on them. So to remove those, you just push the tab down right here, and they just slide right off. So let's get all of those off. And then the coil, there's number 1's back. Number 1 plug's kind of under a wire harness right here. You kind of have to finagle it around to get to it, but it's not too bad. And then to get these out, you just kind of give them a little twist and pull up on them at the same time, and they'll come right up out of there. You can see that one there. So I'm going to get all of these out, and then we'll go on from there. I've got my boots off, or my coil packs off of the plugs here. So I just got holes, and before I remove those spark plugs, I want to take an air hose, an air blower, and I want to blow down each one of them real good, and just verify that if there's any dirt or anything that's gotten loose, it'll blow it up out of there before we remove that plug. We don't want a chance of anything getting down in the cylinder. We got our boots, our coil pack boots off of our plugs here. I've laid them out in order on the table. And we've got our new plugs ready to go, and I've checked the gap on them. They're supposed to be 31 to 35 thousandths, and they look like they're pretty good right out of the box. These are kind of expensive. They're iridiums, but it's what it called for. And the other thing we want to do is inspect these coils to make sure we don't have any white spots where the voltage is jumping, where the current's jumping through anywhere here out to the head. Check it around the boot, look for any white traces, anything like that. These look fine. The other thing to check is the inside. There's a spring inside here, and I don't know if we can see it or not. We might, but make sure it's not burnt. Make sure it's shiny looking, and it is. But if those get burnt, rusty looking, then you need to replace the coils need to be replaced. All of these look fine. I don't see any spots where the voltage is jumping out of them, and I don't see, they all look nice and clean and shiny on the spring on the inside. So I think we're in good shape on our coils and our plugs. So we've blown out our holes around our plugs, so now we're going to go ahead and pull the spark plugs out of this thing. I've just got a socket here. It's a, what am I using? A 5/8 socket. A little bit of black tape around the edge here down in the hole just to get a hold of the plug real good. Tighten that up so it doesn't fall out on me when I go to put it in the down in the hole in the head. I'll get the old ones out and then we'll replace these. See if we can get these plugs back in this old girl. Got my plug retained in my socket here. And thing you always want to do is be sure and screw that plug all the way down by hand. Make sure it's seated by hand. You're no chance of getting that cross threaded. You do not want to cross thread a spark plug. Okay, that one hit the bottom. Snug her down. You don't want to just go crazy. They weren't that tight from the factory. Just good and snug's all you need. And you notice I taped that socket to the swivel on both ends and the extension, so there's no chance of me pulling the socket off and staying on the plug, not being able to get it up out of there. I got it all taped together. We'll get the rest of these in and we'll get on with the program here. Now it's time to put our coils back in. Got our plugs in. Make sure those are pushed all the way down, kind of give them a little twist. Make sure they're seated good. And then we just plug them back up. Like a yay. That's all there is to that. We'll get those other three back in. Okay, we're all hooked up here with our gauges on our throttle bodies. We got 4 lines coming out here. Each line's going to the first leftmost gauge is on the number 1 throttle body, and then 2, 3, and 4 across the gauge set here. And on the Versys, you've got a line, a teed bunch of vacuum lines. There's 4 of them here that hook into the leftmost port on each throttle body. You pull this off, and then it's got a hose that hooks into the T here. It gets vacuum off all 4 of those. Plug that off, set that out of the way, and then your gauges go on those 4 ports there, the leftmost ports on each one of those. Clear as mud, right? We're hooked up on our ports. We'll warm this thing up and take a look at these gauges and see how our throttle, how close the vacuum is on each of the 4 throttle bodies here. We've got our gauges hooked up here and we are idling. We're pretty close. We're close enough I'm not going to mess with it. It's not bad at all. I think it'll be fine, and I don't think I would be able to tell any difference if I did do any tuning on it. So we're going to call that good in my book. Now that we've got our motor all warmed up, be a real good time to go ahead and change the oil in this thing while the oil's warm. We've got our 17mm drain plug bolt right here on the bottom of the oil pan on the side of it. Just knock that loose and we'll get this out of here. Start draining some oil. Let's see if we can get this oil filter off of here. There she goes. It's always a good idea to go ahead and pre-fill your oil filter, especially on this motor. This motor has issues picking up oil the first time when there's air in the filter. We kind of have to burp the filter to get the thing to fill the filter up and get oil pressure to the engine when you change your oil. And I'll show you how to do that, but it'll take a long time to get oil pressure if you don't. That ain't cool at all. Let that sit a little bit. It'll soak through and we'll put a little more in it. Put a little oil on our O-ring so it won't grab when we go to tighten the filter up. See if we can put a little love in here. Got our oil filter back on and our drain plug back in it. See if we can get it to pick up oil and build some oil pressure, and we'll be in good shape. We got new oil in it. We got a new filter. I've pre-filled the filter with oil as much as I could get in it. And one of the things we want to do here when we start this is to burp the filter to get the air, let the air push out of the filter, the oil come in and the air come out. This, for some reason, this motor does not pick up oil good when you change the oil filter. It needs to be burped, or it'll sit here and run with no oil pressure for a long time. That ain't cool at all. So what I'm going to do when I start this, I'm going to get down here, and I've left the filter kind of loose. I'm going to crack the filter, unscrew it just a little bit until I see oil start coming out the bottom of it, and then screw it back in. That'll let the air push out and the oil come in, and I should have oil pressure then instantly. We'll give it a shot here and see how it goes. Yeah, as soon as I burped it and stood up, it had oil pressure, so that's a good deal. Other than that, all I've got to do now is go to putting this thing back together. I got quite a bit of work to do to get all the covers and everything put back on this, but that was, it's all right. We got our service done, got plugs and an air filter. Our throttle body sinks pretty good. That's kind of what it's like servicing the Versys 1000. Hope you got something out of it, and I appreciate you all hanging around and watching me work on this. Until I catch up with you next time, you all take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you later.